Yeah.
The Wytheville Planning Commission meeting for Thursday, October the 9th, 2025 at 6 p.m. is now called to order. First on the agenda is establishment of a quorum, which we have. Approval of the agenda. And we're going to
So
need...
move.
On 1 second, just 1 minute there. We're going to need a motion and second to amend the agenda to include scheduling a public hearing for the November 13th Planning Commission meeting for Donna Leonard to modify her special exception permit. So I need a motion for that.
So moved. Second.
All right. Is there any discussion regarding that? There'll be further explanation later, at a later date. If not, it's going to require a roll call vote.
Quicker, aye. Ken Jones, aye.
Edison, aye.
Anderson, aye.
Schmidt, aye.
Jones, aye.
Litton, aye.
All right. The consent agenda. Need to have a motion for that.
So move. Second.
All right. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. Moving on down, citizens period is now open, and we have one person that would like to speak. Lisa Neer, okay. If you'll please approach the podium, state your name and address for the record.
Lisa Neer, I live at 875 West Spiller. Look, just so you know, I'm not just like anybody popping in here. I've met with the town planning in Philadelphia in 1990 before they revamped the entire river section there. I lived in Reading, Pennsylvania, and was extremely involved in the community, particularly with the downtrodden and people trying to find help and that type of thing. And the reason I'm mentioning that is because I'm pretty sure I'm going to come off the wrong way in the beginning, and I want you to know that I am most interested, like the open door, things like that, I think are wonderful. However, my concern here is that you have the low-income housing at the one end of town. Okay, and now they're putting low-income housing at the other end of town. So either way you come into Wytheville, as far as I'm concerned, it's going to bankrupt the town. I mean, originally, I've been here for 10 years, and I love it here, okay? And originally when I came here, everybody was talking about how it was a retirement town. Well, I don't think people are going to want to retire in a town that is, like, over-processed with the drugs. Here's the thing, like you come down Main Street, okay, and this is my other section, but they interconnect. You come down Main Street and there's this big sign about drug testing, and there's a lot of medical places and stuff like that, and that's great, but they should be like a half block off of Main Street. Like Main Street, to me, and especially in a mountain town, should be like thrift shops, restaurants, things like this. It's just a suggestion. You can do whatever you want with it. But I'm just saying, like, if you make the Main Street the mountainy type thing, I think you'll do a lot better tourist-wise and move. You'd have to put in some kind of statute or law, but anything other than that to half a block away from your main street, I think it would help. Like I said, do with it what you want. But my major concern is that you're cutting off both sides of the town, and there's no way to get into Wytheville without going through low-income housing. And I understand the necessity, and I think it's wonderful that Wytheville is reaching out to people and trying to help them. That's why I was trying to tell you the stuff in the meantime. I don't want you to think I'm a rotten person. I'm not. But right now, and that's where I live. I mean, I live 2 blocks away from Food City, and they had opened up a recovery center, which I have no problem with. There's really been no problems there, but now they're doing the low-income housing. You have the open door, which I love. There are mental health and drug testing signs all over that area right now, which is nice. But again, if you're coming in as a tourist, what you're seeing is big sign, we're doing drug testing on Main Street, all these little signs, and you just cut off both parts of town, which I really think that's going to hurt Wytheville. I don't know what you could do about it at this point. I'm sorry, usually I'm on disability, and like, this is actually really hard. I've been meaning to write you guys a letter for a while. But I just wanted to, like, there are just some things, and I don't know what you could do about that, because what's the plan here? If you cut off both sides of town with low-income housing, you're not going to get people who are going to want to retire here. I wouldn't want to retire in a drug town, and that's what it looks like. Or at least that's what it's potentially going to look like, and it's getting there already. So this was just a food for thought for you guys. I mean, I'm not telling you what to do. I would, however, like, be interested in talking about different topics in the future if you were interested, but it was something I just needed to say, because that side of town right now, and the other part of this on a personal thing is I moved here 10 years ago. I'm on disability. I may look fine, but trust me, I am so far from fine, it's not even funny. I put a lot into my house to make it not only a permanent house, my grave's already out back. I went through a lot of work to make it a fully handicapped house because my son's also handicapped. And on a personal note, I kind of really don't want that trashed, you know? Like, I want to live here, I want to be here, and I'm just concerned about the presentation you're giving to particularly tourists that come into this town. Because when I first moved here, and if I'm talking too long, you can shut me up, that's fine. But originally I wanted to move to Asheville. I like arts and music and things like that, and that just didn't work out. And I found this town, and I like it. It has the potential to grow, although I've lived in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, and tourist towns leave a lot to be desired, too. But I'm really interested in this town being okay. I love the fact that you guys are, like, really into music. That's a really good thing. But the arts and, like I said, the flea market-y type places, thrift shops, things like that, for a mountain town, that really, Main Street should be the center thing. And while we're at it, right on Main Street, right across from Food City, there's an old museum. It's privately owned. You guys know what I'm talking about? I can't think of the name. But the place is amazing. I mean, if you've been in there, this guy has stuff that I've never seen anywhere else. And I never ever see it publicized anywhere. And I got to be honest with you, at least as far as I'm concerned, it's the most interesting thing in Wytheville, and like stuff like that. So that being said, my main point here was that I think somebody needs to think about cutting off both sides of town. One side would be one thing, but both sides it's going to cause you a lot of problems. And like I said, my grave's already here. I'm staying, so I'm really interested. So again, take it as you want, but thank you for your time. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Or actually, does anybody have any comments towards that before I leave? I'm just curious.
Can I ask a question?
Do what? I'm sorry, I didn't.
I'm just asking, like, have you guys even thought about that both sides are going to be low-income housing coming in?
I was just going to ask to clarify that. Which low income are you
By
specifically
the veterans
referring
thing,
to?
you have the low-income housing there. And I got to tell you, the first time I went in there and came out, I literally thanked God that I didn't have to live there.
Which
Okay, and
place
it's
was
not like per se, I don't mean this for all people, but you have a lot of drugs, yeah.
Is that up by All Star Rentals you're talking about?
Well, you know where the veterans.
Yeah.
Okay, so
I'm
you're
sorry, I don't even know.
Freedom Village.
talking about
I
health.
think so. Hibbs Ferry Road.
But you have that, and now they're building, what is it, right? The police officer that used to own the block back there, he had sold, and my understanding was that they're putting up low-income housing there. And again, I wouldn't have a problem with that, but you can't take away from the fact that with low-income housing, you're going to have drug problems and robberies. I mean, that's comes with the territory. And that's my major concern, is that you just blocked off both sides of town, and anybody that, it's not a good thing. I don't know what to do about it. I would have liked to have opened my mouth a long time ago, and I'm sorry. But I think you guys ought to give it some consideration, because I just foresee it as a big problem in the future for you. And I love this town, and like I said, I'm staying here. Okay, well, have a good evening.
Thank you.
for your
Thank you.
time. And, I'd like my phone number somewhere if somebody was interested. Sure. What are you guys doing with the part that they just pulled down near the swimming pool? Where the stadium things were?
The splash park is
Splash pond.
I was thinking that would have been really cool if you put in like a small wave pool or something. You could make like $10 a head for a half hour.
I don't think a decision's been officially made, but that is one of the plans.
Well, it was nice to meet you all.
Okay.
Have a
Thank
good
you.
year.
Thank you.
There are no more citizens that wish to speak, so we will close the citizens period and move on to other business. Overview of the joint meeting held between the Wytheville Town Council and the Wytheville Planning Commission. Ms. Holt.
Thank you, everybody. I just wanted to take a minute to thank each of you who attended the joint meeting that we had with the Town Council. I felt that it went very well, and I know it took an evening out of your schedule, so thank you for that. Just as a quick recap, what I heard at that meeting, correct me if I'm wrong, but the Town Council has authorized us to continue our work on the UDO, although at a slower pace, and so I hope that we can resume that in the next meeting or two. In the meantime, they did want us to address some of the more pressing legal issues in the current zoning ordinance, so that is the focus of tonight's meeting, is to try to get in front of some of those things, and we are going to make those changes very minimal, but I will go over those further down the agenda. Okay.
Did they already have a meeting then? And they've approved that then?
No, they have not, but I believe that they will,
Okay.
and I feel like that is the general direction that we are headed in.
Okay.
Okay.
And when is that again, Elaine?
The meeting of the Town Council? It'll be at the end of this month, is it the
So it's coming.
23rd?
You said 3 weeks ago, didn't you, David?
Yeah.
I thought it was this last Monday, but it
No,
didn't.
we skipped this Monday meeting because several members are going to VML.
I
So
see.
they're not meeting, the Town Council's not meeting towards the end of the month.
Okay.
Okay, moving on. Consideration by the Wytheville Planning Commission to dispense with the Thursday, December the 11th, 2025 meeting due to Christmas holidays. And we usually do that each year. Requires a motion.
So moved.
Second.
Is there any discussion regarding the motion?
If something comes up that needs to be dealt with, it'll obviously,
Absolutely.
okay.
All those in favor, please say aye. Opposed? Current zoning ordinance updates, long-term camping.
All right, so we began this conversation a few months ago. As you recall, the Town Council asked us to look at language in the current zoning ordinance to prohibit long-term camping in town. We did have a good conversation about that at the last two meetings. I'm going to go ahead and pass around that draft, which is really just 2 pages. The section that we're looking at for the current zoning ordinance is a section called uses not allowed or not permitted, and that's where we thought we would put this. Essentially, we had discussed long-term camping being defined as 2 weeks. Since our last meeting, I gave that some more thought, and I wanted to run another idea by the Planning Commission. So one of the reasons why the Town Council wanted us to look at this was because we had somebody who was residing in a tent at a very busy fast food restaurant in the front lawn. And it was a Friday afternoon. I remember everybody was scrambling because everybody was like, what are we going to do about this? Well, it was private property, right? So the police went to the proprietor of the restaurant and said, hey, you've got a guy who's pitched a tent here. You know, this may not be appropriate. Would you mind asking him to leave? Because it was private property and not public property, we could not force him to leave. We needed the people who own the property to ask him to leave. So it took a little bit of time, but the owner of the property who does not live here, we had to track them down, did give permission to the police to ask him to leave the private property. So in thinking about that incident, I got to thinking about the 2-week time frame, and I just thought maybe we wanted to talk about that a little bit tonight. Because if we had another situation where we had an individual living in a tent on a piece of private property in town, and this is in a commercial area, we wouldn't have the right laws to address that if we left it 2 weeks. So what I did was I took another stab at the language to distinguish between residing or camping in a recreational vehicle, which I left at 2 weeks, and then long-term camping in a tent. And so that's the difference you're going to see between when we have discussed this in the last meeting and tonight. And really, this is all still up for conversation. We're not anywhere close to adopting this, but I really just wanted to carve out some time tonight for us to look at this again. And I'm just going to open up the floor for general conversation.
What is your suggestion?
We still have this idea that we didn't want to unnecessarily restrict people who were genuinely recreating in a tent, such as children or, if you're visiting family. But, as somebody who does sleep in a tent quite a bit, I camp quite a bit, typically 2 or 3 nights, you're good. You're ready to get out of that tent after 2 or 3 nights. And so I suggested 4 nights. That still might be a little bit long. But that I felt like that might be a good balance between somebody who was legitimately wanting to camp on their property and an individual who was looking at more of a long-term situation.
So, for kids who want to put up a tent in the backyard and camp there, they'll only be able to do that for 4 days. Is that correct?
With this draft, correct.
Well, why could, I thought at one time we had decided that the written permission from the property owner would solve all the problems, and it would, in this instance you just described, would solve that because that particular person wouldn't have had written permission. Is that?
That could work. We also have situations where we had another situation where an individual had permission from a family member and was residing long-term for months. So I could see that being problematic as well. It was a mother-son relationship, and she knew that he was homeless, and so she enabled him to stay on that property for several months, and it became a problem for the neighborhood because there was drug activity, and then he had his friends come and pitch their tents. And so both of those situations I was trying to factor into this draft.
I mean, I think, if you want to shorten the 14-day period, I don't have a problem with that. It just needs to make sense. But I mean, let's face it, kids camping in their backyard, nobody's going to, we're not going to expect the police to go bother them. I mean, you're trying to put an ordinance in that to target particular problematic areas and problems when someone complains about it. And so, if we need to shorten it, that's fine, because like you said, nobody's going to camp for more than a couple nights at a time. But I mean, I think the written permission is the kind of the caveat in the whole thing, that it would take out the gray area of, well, the property owner said I could. Well, if you don't have it,
Right.
then you're not supposed to be here. So,
But can you do a combination of the written permission and the 4 days, or is that a little excessive?
I think so.
That way you take care of both problems. I don't know what you guys think, but
Saying 4 days with written permission.
yes, sir, to try and take care of both problems, because if someone does give, like Elaine was explaining, the one lady gave permission to her son to stay there who may have been homeless or whatever in a tent, so she's given the written permission, but for someone else to give written permission, I mean, you could basically just stay there 4 days if you want to, that would be it, and without written permission, the 4 days covers that. So I don't know, a combination would be best for both. But that 4 days does seem pretty short, but I don't know, you know, I mean, if someone with family members were coming in generally, but I guess they're not really going to come to your backyard. I don't know. You know? What do you
Just
think?
from personal experience.
Right.
I grew up out on West U,
Yeah.
and my aunt and uncle, cousins,
Right.
Chicago, come down every summer,
Yeah.
pull a pop-up camper and park in our backyard for a couple of weeks.
Right.
That was our
And it was great,
visiting
wasn't it?
time. You know? I don't know that 2025 that happens a lot anymore.
I don't think it does, but I don't know. I mean, I imagine, you know, back then it would have been great to do something like that, but I don't know if they do that anymore, or if it's a popular thing or not. I'm not
Yeah.
sure.
Well, you could do a camper a longer term and a tent a shorter term. And another thing to consider, you know, whatever amount of days we determine, maybe 4 days out of the month or 30 days. Is, you know, they say, well, I'm going to camp on this lot for 4 days, and, you know, there's lots around, or parcels around town that have 4 or 5 lots, and technically they could jump from lot to lot, and,
But with
you know, I know how people are. I know how people think, so.
Right.
but with the written permission, you need to have written permission.
You'd have written permission on it, and it could be the same landowner, and
Right.
you get 4 days on this lot, 4 days on that, you know, and then it's like, well, no, who's keeping track of all this, you
Go
know?
back to the next one.
Yeah.
Right. So you'll see in this current draft, there's a distinction between long-term camping and a recreational vehicle, which I believe defined as camping unit, and then long-term camping in a tent. To make that distinction between, because I do think it's less of an impact if somebody is in a hard-shelled recreational vehicle than it would be if somebody was in a tent. But the good news is we don't have to make a final decision on this tonight. I'm really just trying to kick the can so that when we are ready to put this whole revision together, this part will be ready. So if you have any comments or suggestions to make this better, you can say so now, or you can let me know after tonight. But I think this can be an ongoing conversation.
I think if we can go through it, just read it more thoroughly, whatever, and have a look that way. if
Okay.
That's okay.
Sure.
I did. I mean, I had a look. This was a few weeks ago, but I did look on other towns and other towns see their ordinances, and I didn't see much on camping or tent or anything.
There's not.
I mean, I looked at West Jefferson, which I know that's North Carolina, but I didn't see anything there. That's a nice little town. I don't know if I checked Pulaski or something like that, but I didn't see anything on this sort of stuff.
Right, and John and I also did that. We looked at several model ordinances that we typically use, and most localities are silent on the topic.
Right.
So
are
I
they
brought
not-
that up to the town attorney. I said, are we missing something here, that we're the only ones doing this? And he couldn't think of any reason why we couldn't do this, and so.
But are other towns having this sort of problem as well? I can't believe that we're the only ones having that problem.
Well, obviously not, because they haven't done an ordinance for it.
So do you think it's because of the 2 entrances that we have the
I did.
issue?
That's the location with the 77 and 81 crossing through here tends to be a bottleneck of sorts of travelers. going foot.
We have a friend who's an elementary teacher. He had a new student in her class. And so she asked the student why they made the move to Wytheville. And the student said, well, my mom said there's a lot of free stuff that's not. Stuff like the Up and Door Cafe and stuff like that, in my opinion, should be for the local community. People that are unfortunate shouldn't be attracting people. I mean, because we've got free stuff.
Sure.
And that's probably why we have a camping issue. As long as we're talking about tents, we need to talk about the sanitary issues. These people have to go to the bathroom if they have trailers. They can't just dump the trailer anywhere. So that could be an issue as well.
Right.
Well, I did include some language about the connection of the recreational vehicles for this disposal of the wastewater. So probably what we can do is just go ahead and read through it again between now and the next meeting. And if you want, I'll just put this as a topic again. And maybe we can just set a goal of trying to finalize this section at the next meeting, just in the interest of efficiency. So if that works for everybody, we can do that.
I think we need to get something in place, that's for certain, but, I'm just reading it though, or I'm sitting here thinking of an issue I have right now. What if somebody's just sleeping somewhere? They're not in a tent. They say, well, it says tent.
Right.
Are we gonna try to address that, or?
So that is currently addressed they did revise the town code to address that on public property where you cannot just sleep anymore. Because we were having issues with people sleeping in Withers Park and other parks. And so I think that town code's a little more aggressive because that is public property. But, because we are dealing with private property, that's where that balance of trying to do something respectful for the community but not overreaching is really kind of a fine line.
Are we saying a cardboard box on private property?
I mean, you could go as far as say, someone may want to throw down a blanket and have a picnic and fall asleep under a shade tree. I don't know that we want to be that restrictive. So that's what we got to try to hit that nail on the head. And, the good thing, like with everything we do with these ordinances, is we adopt something, we try it for a while. If it's problematic, we can always bring it back and have another conversation. So while it's important, I think it's also important to note that, we can amend it over time if we don't hit that nail exactly on.
Elaine, when I look at this, just going to say something else, recapping on what George said. Camping units and recreational vehicles shall not be connected to public utilities such as temporary power poles, public water, or public sewer while parked on any property. So that's for 14 days, and it's in the middle of summer, and it's 90 to 100 degrees, and the waste is not being disposed of properly. It's being thrown in the backwoods. Phew. It's going to be.
Yeah, so the reason why you don't want them to connect is because that makes them more permanent.
Right.
So,
And I
there are
agree with
locations like the KOA where you can go and take your recreational vehicle and have it dumped. But I think the concern is that if you let them connect it, you're going to have a really hard time getting them done connected. And in particular with the power, right? They're camping, but if you make it too comfortable, they're going to live there.
Exactly. I'm just thinking
That was the
about-
reason for that.
Yeah. I'm just thinking that's going to be kind of
Yeah.
rank by
Right.
14 days if they, and I'm not saying, that would be a nightmare for the power company trying to, you can't do that either, but it's just something to consider.
I would think if you were legitimately staying with a relative, you would go and
Hopefully
use
you
their
would.
restroom, I'm sure,
Hopefully,
for some of
yes.
your needs.
Yeah.
That probably would help solve that.
Any further discussion about long-term camping? If not, we'll move on to floodplain.
Okay. So quick question. How many of you remember the course on preemption when you took your planning commissioner's class? Raise your hand. Preemption? Federal preemption laws? Or did they go over that? Okay. So the next two topics, floodplain and telecommunications, are both going to deal with federal preemption. And so just to sort of give a framework for how I'm going to present this. And then I went back and I looked at a presentation that John and I did back in 2022 on the National Flood Insurance Program. Do you guys remember that one?
I
We showed
remember
the
that
flood
one, yeah.
map, and it was right when I came to work here. But we can do that presentation again, just so you know. It's all about the National Flood Insurance Program. And if you all want to see that presentation again, I'm happy to put that on the next agenda. You let me know. But in the meantime, I'm just going to give you an update on the zoning ordinance correction as it relates to the floodplain. So essentially, I made some notes here. The town's first floodplain ordinance was in 1988. And then in 2004, the town amended your floodplain section of your zoning ordinance. And that is in Article 16. So if you're familiar with the zoning ordinance that we are currently using, Article 16, and I asked Jeff if he wouldn't mind putting up here on the screen, and he did. Article 16 is the general provisions, and it's got a bunch of just random stuff in there. Well, one of the random things it has in there is your floodplain ordinance, and it is set up as a floodplain overlay. So if you own property in the town of Wytheville, and your property has a special flood hazard area that runs through it, which is typically a river or one of the major creeks or the town branch, then not only do you have to follow your regular zoning requirements, but you also have to follow the floodplain overlay. And this language comes straight from the federal government, okay? So there's the National Flood Insurance Program, which is ran by the federal government, and the Stafford Act of 2004 said that if you're a locality in the United States and you want to receive federal disaster assistance, then you have to adopt a floodplain ordinance and you have to participate in the National Flood Insurance Program. So I'm thinking that's probably why the town of Wytheville did an amendment in 2004 to your floodplain ordinance. So your floodplain ordinance and your general provisions has been the same since 2004, which is why when John and I first started meeting with you all and we started working on the UDO, we took the Virginia Department of Conservation and Recreation has a model floodplain ordinance that has the most up-to-date floodplain regulations straight from the federals down to the state level. And so we took their model ordinance and we sort of massaged that into your draft UDO. And we have not talked about it since 2022 because that was one of the first things that we did. So as you recall, when we were meeting with the town council, we said, hey, we would like to, or they said, or someone said, we need to fix the most pressing issues. So what I would really like to do with the work that we will be doing in the next couple months is to tackle this floodplain issue because it's really outdated. The DCR model ordinance is from 2017. And I didn't make copies because I didn't want to throw a bunch of paper at you all. But I'll just pass around the model ordinance so you can kind of see what it looks like. And if you want me to email it to you, you don't have to really just thumb through it so you can kind of see what it looks like. But I can also email it as well. The other thing that I've done in the last couple of weeks was I reached out to DCR and I said, hey, would you guys mind reviewing our current floodplain language to see if it's anywhere close to the model ordinance? And Stacy from DCR did review it and she did a little checklist and she showed me all the things that was wrong with our ordinance and what was missing. So her advice to us was that instead of trying to fix this, which is in Article 16, that we should just take the model ordinance and massage it for Wytheville and run with that. So since then, I also had a conversation with the town attorney and the interim town manager, and I said, even better, here's an idea. Let's just repeal the floodplain section out of Article 16 because nobody can find it anyways. It's tucked in there. And we do a standalone floodplain ordinance. And so that's, as staff, that's what I'm recommending we do. Similar to our erosion and sediment control ordinance and our subdivision ordinance, it will be a floodplain ordinance that will be a standalone ordinance that if you have property in the special flood hazard area, you can get to it quickly instead of trying to find it in Article 16. The other good thing about it being its own ordinance is it's a lot easier to amend it if there's more changes from either the federal or the state side of things. Because we are a town, in order to amend or adopt an ordinance, it's literally one meeting of the town council. As you know, if it lives in the zoning ordinance, we have to do planning commission, public hearing, town council, public hearing, and it's a little bit more burdensome to try to do it that way. But we have two options. We could either keep it part of the zoning ordinance, or we could do a standalone floodplain ordinance with the model language and just repeal all the floodplain stuff out of Article 16. So, is everybody with me on that line of thinking?
So the floodplain ordinance that we have right now, it's just these 2 pages or 1 page?
No,
like
it's several pages. If you scroll down, Jeff. And everybody can see this now because it lives in our current zoning ordinance. So if you all know where to get to our current zoning ordinance online, you would go to Article 16 and you can just scroll down through it. The changes between 04 and 2017, I don't think are earth-shattering. But here's the kicker. With any locality that has adopted the National Flood Insurance Program model language, you really don't get a lot of room to to massage it. It's going to say, listen, if you're in a special flood hazard district, you're going to have to do this, this, and this. If you're in an AE, you're going to have to do this, this, and this. If you're in an AO, you have to do this, this, and this. There's really no way to beat the federal government by making it too much our own, because that model language is what they're going to require us to have. So,
What, based on my recollection of a couple years ago, weren't they at some point in process of revising those maps
yes.
to I think, well, you know what they were doing. I think it seems like some of the smaller floodplains were going to be pulled off the map. Is that right?
So the state of Virginia has been working with FEMA Region 3 to revise all of the flood maps for the state of Virginia, and they've gone county by county. And I kept hearing we were next, we were next, we were next. So I can check in on that and find out when that is still proposed for Wytheville County. But I know when I was working in Pulaski County, they had just done Pulaski counties. So I do feel like it is coming. I just don't know, maybe with the change in the administration on the federal and the state level, if that slowed things down. But what will end up happening is when they do come in and they do revise our flood maps, they're going to want to look at our ordinance, and they're going to make us update it anyway. So we're really just getting ahead of the curve. But because we're using the DCR model ordinance, I do feel like whatever we go to is going to be the most legal and up-to-date document that the state has.
So is that the DC ordinance?
The one I'm passing around is
Yeah.
the model ordinance.
That's
yes.
the model ordinance.
Yep.
But you said you had a report back from the other
From
lady.
Stacy, and I can pass that around. It's a little bit, I just made one copy, but you'll see over here on the comments section, she put what was missing from this.
So she's comparing that to ours. Is that correct?
Yes, and
Okay.
so you can pass that around and take a look. And I can email this as well, but I didn't want to print a bunch of paper and throw it at you guys if you didn't want it. And this is something I really just wanted to get a sense from the Planning Commission, what your preference is about the direction before I go to typing. I would prefer for it to be a standalone ordinance, because I am not looking forward to try to take that model ordinance and fit it into that formatting. I don't know how many of you guys have done Word documents, but you start out with your 16-10 and then you got to tab over to your A, and then it becomes A1. And then it becomes 16-10 A1.1. And I just see this as a nightmare to try to fit that into that.
Is there any problems with having a standalone ordinance?
I don't think so. When I worked in Pulaski County, we had a standalone ordinance, and when I worked in Grayson County, we had a standalone ordinance, and it worked fine. So I would prefer that, but at the same time, I respect your opinion and will do whatever the Planning Commission would like for me to do.
And I think standalone seems the way to go, as opposed to trying to change that, As long as there's no legal implications of doing standalone, then I don't see a problem doing it that way.
Does anybody else have a strong opinion on the matter?
I mean, I'm fine with standalone. I mean, especially if it's hard to find for other people. But the only reason I was asking about the revisions was there's multiple areas throughout Wytheville and Wythe County that aren't truly floodplains. They're mislabeled. It creates problems. So I'm sitting here thinking, you may have a little, and correct me if I'm wrong, with our current ordinance, you may have a little bit of leeway, but if we go with this, it may say, no, this is what we're going with. But if it's non-compliant, it's non-compliant. But hopefully they can revise it and get those areas reflective of a true floodplain and not be problematic for those landowners. But
was it worse before than what it is actually, or?
At some point in history, from my recollection, that there's been stuff mislabeled that wasn't truly a floodplain, and once they do it, and then you're kind of stuck with it. And I've heard of that happening in other, not just in Virginia. They do some sort of aerial deal, and
I would have thought it'd be getting worse, not better, with the flooding.
I think the challenge was the mapping. When they rolled out the National Flood Insurance Program, there was engineers who was doing mapping based on computer modeling. And I actually had that come up when I worked in Grayson County, because typically your zoning administrator is also your floodplain administrator. But if you all know where Brush Creek is over near Freeze, so there was a lot of floodplain over in Grayson County, and it did create a lot of headache because of the mapping over there. But there was a guy who, I think he wanted to build a garage, and it was kind of near a little tiny stream. And on the map, the special flood hazard zone looked huge. It looked like, you know, he was on the New River somewhere. And I go out there to meet the guy, and literally it is a stream about this big. And it shows that the floodplain was going like way out. And so it can be a problem. I do agree with you with that. But here in town, luckily, we don't have a lot of floodplain. We have a little bit of floodplain coming down the town branch and then down near Reed Creek. And then there's a couple of shallow flooding areas. But as it relates to your comment about the standalone adopting the DCR or what we have now, it's still the same. You're still going to have to get your elevation determined and that. So there really wouldn't be any difference from like a headache standpoint. Unfortunately, I wish we could make it better, but you're still going to have to show that they met the special flood hazard area requirements either way.
Elaine, I think from looking at this, to try to put this into that is impossible. I mean, I just don't even see it as doable, maybe. A lot.
It's going to be a challenge.
Yes. I agree with doing that.
Well, if everybody's okay with that, that is what I will go start working on, and then at some point I will share that standalone ordinance with you all, and then obviously we'll be updating the town council as well. Does anybody have any questions about floodplain before we move on?
Do you know when they're coming out with that new map?
I will ask, and I will give you all an update. I'll get it straight from DCR.
Email us to
Yes, and I will email that out, absolutely.
Telecommunications.
Okay, so this is the second topic that has to do with federal preemption. What I did was I typed up a very quick history of telecommunications in Wytheville, and you know, we're not going to go over this word for word. You can take this home with you. We did also talk about this in 2022 because this was another one of the hot topics, right, when we started working on the UDO. So essentially, it looks like Wytheville's first wireless telecommunications policy was developed in 1998. And I wasn't around then, but I'm thinking it's probably was in response to the Federal Telecommunications Act of 1996. So the history of the Federal Telecommunications Act of 1996, those of you just like me who were around back then, I'm sure you had the same thing I did, the big black cell phone with the case and the huge antenna. Boy, we were something, weren't we? We had that thing in our car, plugged up to our cigarette lighter. So you know what? The internet, cell phones was all the rage back then, but what was happening on the federal level was localities did not like the big towers going up everywhere. So localities across the country were making it very difficult for telecom companies to put up towers, and so the federal government responded to that, and they said, we're going to do this new law. Essentially, the law said that the federal law will preempt local and state control by requiring that decisions denying wireless facilities be in writing and supported by substantial evidence. That the law would prevent localities from adopting regulations that prohibit or have the effect of prohibiting wireless services. The law would prevent discrimination against equivalent providers. It would require localities to act on applications for wireless facilities within a reasonable time frame. And it preempted localities from regulating the placement, construction, and modification of wireless facilities on the basis of environmental effects of radio frequency emissions. And I remember that. Remember, everybody was worried about the a big tower going up and all this radioactive pollution making us all sick. So in essence, I looked in the records, and in 2000, the town of Wytheville got the almost 200-foot tall tower behind Ramada. And then in 2020-ish, the 49-foot tower behind Walgreens was erected. So essentially from the records, those were the two, main towers that went through zoning review. Around 2005, the town used a third party called the Center for Municipal Solutions to assist the town with permitting of wireless applications. And in 2005, in partnership with this company, the town rewrote your telecommunications chapter. So in essence, your first telecommunications chapter was developed in 1998 and then revised in 2005. And it has not been changed since 2005. So your existing Article 21 in the zoning ordinance, and I believe Jeff pulled it up there on the screen, you can still see it to this day residing inside of your zoning ordinance online as Article 21. So what happened was in 2022, everything changed. The federal government passed another law called the Spectrum Act. And it was also called the Middle Class Tax Relief and Job Creation Act of 2012. What they tried to do with that act was to come back and tell localities that you need to allow the co-location of telecommunications equipment. Because what was happening was every time somebody wanted to change out an antenna on one of those towers or replace it or add another antenna, localities were making them pay $3,000 an application. They were restricting them from doing it, and it was not good because people were wanting to put up more towers because you couldn't co-locate on somebody else's tower. So what happened was the federal law was passed, and if you turn the page, you'll see some of the things that it tried to achieve. It was called the Spectrum Act. It really had to do with co-locating new equipment and doing more administrative review of things like antennas that really weren't very impactful to the community. So the Virginia Code was updated in 2017 and 2018 to respond to this new federal law. And we've been wanting to update our zoning ordinance to reflect the new Code of Virginia standards. And because we've been working on the UDO for so long, we've not had a chance to do that. So one of the other things I would like to achieve with this basic patch of our current zoning ordinance is to take our current Article 21, which luckily all of that is in one article, with nothing else. So I do think that article, we will be able to just essentially repeal that entire article and replace it, or I can just do some minor edits to reflect the Virginia Code 2018 standards, which essentially means that we're going to add language on towers under 50 feet, which was what the state wants us to do, because any towers under 50 feet needs to be by administrative review. We cannot require a special exception permit. We need a section on the co-location of antennas, again, as an administrative review. And then we need a section on wireless, small cell wireless, which is, you've probably seen them around these little boxes like this that people will put in the community. So I'm really just opening the floor for conversation tonight, and I'm happy to begin work on this tomorrow, but I just wanted to get your sense that you were okay with me to begin work on this new section, Article 21.
I don't have any problem.
To be honest, I don't know too much about it. Just what you've told me, Elaine. So
At the very bottom of your sheet, if you want to do more research on this when you get home, you all know how to go to the Code of Virginia, correct? You can go to the Code of Virginia and you can type in 15.22316, and you can really get a sense for what it is that the Virginia Code, which reflects this Spectrum Act, what they really want us to put in our ordinances. And if you all want, I can also send you that section if that's helpful to you all.
would that Spectrum Act just be added to the existing ordinances that you have there already, or do you have to redo the existing ordinances?
So what we will have to do is we'll have to include language on those three categories: co-location of antennas, removal and replacement of antennas, small cell wireless, and poles under 50 foot. So,
So you just talk about revising the existing ordinances, not putting a new sub-ordinance like you're doing with the floodplain one.
correct.
Okay.
I think we can just keep Article 21 because luckily that's all that's in Article 21. So unlike Article 16 where it's got all this other stuff going on, I can probably just type right into that and take out the sections that are no longer legal and put in the new sections if they want. Is that okay with everybody?
Sounds fine to me, yeah.
So what we'll do is at the November meeting, my goal is to have that ready for you all, and we'll go through it bit by bit, and I'll do a strike through on what's coming out, and then maybe highlight what's going in.
Moving on, other legal review.
Okay, so, again, just in an effort to get the current zoning ordinance to where we feel okay with it. We're not gonna go into the zone districts and start changing setbacks. We're not gonna go into the zone districts and start changing uses. We're just gonna deal with the things that are really glaring, like, don't know about this, may not be legal. So I had a conversation with the town attorney, earlier this week, and I asked him if it was okay if I sent him a list of some of the things that I think he needs to review. And so what I did was I just made a summary sheet, and I just wanted to share it with you all. Again, my hope is that by the November meeting, the town attorney would have had an opportunity to look at these things, and we'll meet together and talk about them. But because you may see some of these strike throughs and changes at the November meeting, I just thought it was useful to mention today that we are going through this exercise, and you'll probably see some of this in November. Does that sound good to everybody?
Yeah.
All right.
Okay.
And if it's okay with the planning commission, because we did add an agenda to set the public hearing for Ms. Donna Leonard, if that's okay, I would like to do that at this time. And I can give a quick update on that. So Ms. Donna Leonard, her special exception permit was approved for 4th Street to operate her accounting business. Once she got out there and started doing some grading and some configuring, she's having some issues with her original parking layout. So what she would like to request is a modification to that, and I told her that the process for doing that modification, because she has the conditions attached to her permit, is to go back through the process. And so this conversation just happened earlier this week, and so I said, Planning Commission's meeting on Thursday, we can set the public hearing for November, and so what you would expect is that I will give a staff report in November at our meeting about those changes, and we can talk about it then. But we do have to have the public hearing again. And so in order to facilitate that in a timely manner, I would very much appreciate it if you could make a motion to consider scheduling that public hearing.
Has any of the work already been done?
It has. So she has the grading in the front complete and the gravel, and she's put up her signs. So most of her heartburn is with the parking in the back and the handicap parking space.
So what we're seeing in the front,
Yes,
back,
yes. And the handicap parking space.
Need a motion and then a second.
I do.
Okay. I move that we schedule a public hearing for the November 13th Planning Commission meeting for Donna Leonard to modify her special exception permit. Need a second?
Yeah.
Second.
Okay, and it requires a roll call vote.
Ripper, aye.
Kate Jones, aye.
Patterson, aye.
Anderson, aye.
Schmidt, aye.
Jones, aye.
Litton, aye.
Any other issues that we need to discuss before we adjourn? If not, this meeting is adjourned at 6:55.